Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Vince Rocco in New York, where the state of our industry can be hard. So let's get right to what everyone is talking about. Most people think the hardest part of real estate is the market, the clients, or the uncertainty. And yes, those things can be challenging. But the real pressure often comes from something quieter. Real estate asks you to do two full-time jobs at the same time. You're expected to transact at a high level, managing deals, deadlines, negotiations, and client expectations, while also building the business that will produce the deal months from now. The problem is that transacting is urgent. It demands immediate attention. Business development is important, but the payoff is delayed. So it's easy to push aside when things get busy. Over time, though, you get very good at managing what's in motion, but inconsistent at creating what comes next. And maybe part of the shift is, what if checking in isn't about you at all? What if it's simply about staying connected? That's what we're going to talk about today. And here on set with me are Jared Anton from Brown Harris Stevens and Molly Townsend from Molly Townsend Consulting. And they join me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and my viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. This is Talking New York Real Estate. So let's go behind the headlines and inside the state of our industry.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you hear a lot about how crucial it is to have the right partners in this industry. At Roadway, we don't just move your clients, we give them an experience they'll love. Specialized services to our white glove treatment, it's all about making sure your clients feel taken care of every step of the way. And if you're looking for a rewarding referral program, reach out to me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back, and I apologize. Molly is stuck in traffic. Today is St. Patrick's Day here in New York, and it's pandemonium out there, so she will be here, hopefully at some point. But, of course, Jared Anton is here, and we're going to talk a little bit today about why we perceive this business being difficult, okay? Real estate industry. We've got a lot going on, as you heard in the intro. You know, we've got urgent matters that we need to tend to. We've got things that we should be working on in our pipeline, called prospecting, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes agents, kind of fall down trying to decide where the priorities should be or how they should better prioritize. And so asking the experts today, we're going to find out a lot more about this, Jared. So, real estate agents the industry asks agents to transact and prospect at the same time. Yeah. So there again, that urgency and then that, thinking about the future. In your experience, where do most professionals lose that balance? Because I believe it is a very defined balance.
Yeah, I mean, you can't transact if you don't prospect. So if you want to get to that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you have to prospect. Yes, we have to throw in the St. Patty's jokes. So truthfully, the one non-negotiable for any real estate agent has to be prospecting, right? If you want to be able to continue jumping from peak to peak and not find yourself at this daunting place of being at the bottom of a cliff, not knowing how you're going to scale that mountain, even if you've done it 3, 5, 10, 50 times, when you have to rebuild your book of business, it's incredibly daunting. So it is so important to prospect all the time, even when you're busy. In fact, arguably, the worst time not to prospect is when you're busiest, because you know that you're going to close that current book of business. You're going to have to restart. So the prospecting is the key to be able to ensure that you have that consistent flow of business.
But you're right, and that was leading me into the next question, because when you do get busy, you kind of put aside the prospecting, because we're all, thinking about, I got to get this, sense of urgency, moving along, I got to get this transaction going. And it seems to happen consistently. So in your opinion, is there a way that an agent can kind of think about, well, because what you just said is 100% correct, hey, I have to deal with the urgency, and we've all done that. I was just doing this 2 days ago. I was telling a friend who's off camera here today. But yet you can't lose sight of that prospecting, because, as I said in the opening, prospecting is tomorrow, is next month, is, whenever. And it could be even bigger than what you're currently working on. But there's like no consistency I'm finding, even when I was managing agents for a period of time. They kind of get lost in trying to figure out what the real priority should be.
It's hard because we all have competing commitments or competing priorities, right? So I think it comes down to making sure that you can time block effectively and that you have a proactive mindset, right? If you're able to work proactively, you will be ahead of the curve. Unfortunately, too many people in this business fall into this reactive pattern. And they may not be doing it on purpose, but a client calls, this thing comes out of the blue,
Absolutely.
this issue comes back, and like, holy cow, now I got to go do all these things, and all the things that I should have done don't get done because you're going to react to the fires. So what's important is making sure that you're starting your day early and you're using that morning time to cast out those hooks or make those outbound dials or text messages. And that's a key time to be able to prospect, because if you use your morning hours effectively, there is generally less urgency at that time in the day. So if you can spend an hour and a half at the start of your day getting that done, that gives you the right time through the time block and to make sure that the rest of your day can be spent to handle more of the mid or down funnel activities.
That's so well said, and I 100% agree with that, because I was going to ask you, I think a lot of agents sometimes underestimate what is really required to get both things done. And I personally have always found that when I get up in the morning and I make my cup of coffee and I sit at my computer, if I'm working from home or even if I head to the office, that's the time that I want to think about something new, because, as you said, most people don't really start anything until 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning anyway when it comes to the real estate industry. So when you're thinking about prospecting, thinking about sending out that email or a text message or calling somebody, that's probably the best time to do it. But I still fall back on, agents get all jammed up trying to figure out, how do I prioritize and what should be important? I mean, deals are deals. And I think sometimes that's when, and you've all heard me talk about this, many months on the show, the difference between transactional agents and relationship, type of agents, because that transactional agent's going to get screwed up all the time because all they're going to think about is urgency.
Right.
That's it. Nothing else. But the relationship agency is going to think about, yes, what's urgent, what's on my table today, but also, what am I going to do tomorrow to keep my current book of business happy with me?
Right.
Or a year ago I sold something to somebody. How are they going to think about me or remember coming back to me? Prospecting is everything. But time management, as we talk about, and I remember from my corporate days, time management was everything. We're expected to do a lot of stuff. We're expected to think about a lot of things. And we're expected to, be accomplished in everything that we choose to do. Why is it challenging for agents in particular? I mean, I can go back to corporate days, but I think the challenge in the real estate industry with time management is a hell of a lot. Is it that urgency? Is it that fear? Is it that sense of, oh my God, I'm going to lose something? Time management is important, but I find a lot of agents have issues with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's because this job lacks structure, right? And you look at what makes a stereotypically good real estate agent, they're a people person. They're out there. They have a larger than life personality. They know how, to be a chameleon, and they crave human interaction, right? Or human interaction. That type of personality is not always the most operationally minded, strategic in that way, right? I'm making a gross generalization, but very often the personality traits that make a really good real estate agent don't necessarily also create the right business foundation. And this is why we see teams. This is why we see, people having admins and assistants and things like that. It's to be able to compensate for some of the things that they may not be best in, and to be able to enable them to continue soaring in where they're good. So this becomes then the question about, how do I make the investment in myself and my business before I may need it? Because I have to make that investment if I ever want to get to the next level. And if I don't make that investment, then I may not get to that next level. I may not be able to hit those highs because things are going to fall through the crack, because I'm not going to be able to deliver the best service to my clients, because I'm not going to be able to manage, maintain, build, or develop the relationships as well as I could have. So functionally, we are all limited by time, right? So the difference between good and great is how you're making use of that time, how you're now leveraging technology, tools, resources, other people to be able to make you more effective, to be able to leverage or multiply your time. So that's where we are now. To me, the biggest piece about tech is how people will use tech that gives them back more time to be more human, to be more available, and to invest more in their interpersonal relationships.
Look, I've said for years, everybody in New York City is being, we're talking about New York City, okay? New York City real estate industry. Everybody in New York City is busy. I'm so busy. That goes for our clients and everything. I'm so busy. And I always respond with, busy doing what? What are you doing? You're no busier than me or anybody else. We all get up in the morning, have our breakfast, go to work, whatever, run around, come home, end of the day. What are you so busy doing? Which I think kind of lends to the sense of urgency, that agents sometimes feel. And what I wanted to ask you is, why is this industry so urgent? Why is this industry so we focus on all of the urgent things that have to be done. Forget the prospecting, but why is everything so urgent?
Well,
what makes people, panic? So to speak?
Fear of loss, right? Fear of losing the deal. I think there's also competition. There's this reactive mindset, as we talked about a few moments ago, but it's also because things are time-bound, things are sensitive. And, if a client says jump, an agent's natural reaction in many cases is how high, not to try to understand why they want them to jump or jump where to go. Like there's not necessarily a lot of strategic questioning behind there.
Is there thinking or anything strategic going on in there or not?
Correct. So, when you start letting sort of the emotion run wild, because it's like, oh, the client needs me to do this. If I don't do this, I lose the deal, right? We know the fear of loss in many times is greater than the fear of gain, right? Psychology. So people get motivated sort of by trying to avoid loss or trying to lose something. And then they start going in sometimes in a tailspin that allows them to just lose sight of their core priorities, lose sight of what they need to do and things like that. So.
Yeah, like I was telling somebody off camera this morning before the show started, I had a closing last week that was probably one of the worst closings that I can imagine in 24 years that I've been doing this, and all for silly things, all for nonsensical things. And I really honestly feel, and not because it's me, but me as the agent, if I wasn't able to fix whatever was breaking it seemed like every minute of the hour or two that we were closing, I walked away from that thinking, oh my God. So you want to talk about urgency, you want to talk about, stress and pressure. These are the things I believe that make agents really cuckoo sometimes, because if I wasn't there, Jared, and again, it's not because of me personally, but if I, as an agent, wasn't there, I don't even know where this would have gone. Attorneys are good for nothing, bankers are good for nothing. No offense meant, but really? It was all their fault.
Mm-hmm.
So the agent has to stand back and say, no, that's not going to work. No, that's unacceptable. And they're looking at me like, oh.
Yeah, and come from a position of being in control, right? A lot of times in this business, there's so much that is out of our control. And too often agents also give up control, right? When they don't need to. They don't take that proactive approach. They don't take that assertive step. They don't try to insert themselves in trying to move the ball forward. Too often they back up. And when no one is taking responsibility, when no one has ownership over the next step or a desired outcome, it's a lot harder to see it through, and it's a lot harder to see it through in a decided way that is going to remove stress and friction and frustration.
Let's talk about, how effective business development, prospecting, whatever you want to call it, looks today, okay? Based on, when I was in the business, first in the business 24 years ago, I think my prospecting ways or capabilities were different than they are today. Today we have tech. Today we have a whole bunch of things that we really didn't have in those days. Is it still cold calling that's making, inroads, or is it just constant outreach by email blast when you have a client list like I have after 24 years? How has all of that evolved, and is any of that still really important?
There's no one size fits all, right? So it really depends on who the agent is, their personality, the mediums in which they like to communicate, their network, the way that their network likes to be communicated with, their experience, their target market and things like that. So you have to sort of look holistically at who the agent is, who their clientele is, and how they like to be reached. And for some, newsletters are great. For others, regular coffee meetings. For some, it's, some thoughtful touch points and, strategically timed gifts and things like that. But then when you talk about how do you get in front of new people that you don't know, this is where it becomes more of that targeted outreach, right? So how do we understand who is our target audience? Who do we want to get in front of, and how do we get in front of them? Some people have good relationships with people that are making introductions, whether that's title people, mortgage people, bankers, movers, whatever. So everyone has a different set of referral sources. And then it's also a matter of how you're leveraging data and information in areas in the market where you're specializing, right? In your niche, to be able to actively prospect, to actively solicit or reach out to, owners who may be coming up based upon statistical, information, the right time to sell. Here at BHS, we just launched a partnership with MarketProof to be able to give our agents MarketProof Pro. And it's really a next level market intelligence platform that can give our agents really deep insights into owners, their length of ownership, and really help inform their prospecting activities so that they can create hyper-personalized outreach at relative scale with relative cost efficiency to be able to drive value for their business.
But I also think, and I was talking offline to somebody this morning before the show, I also think that in order to be better at prospecting and better at, developing business, whether it's cold calling, whether it's, market, tech outreach, whatever, there's got to be a level of knowledge that we as the individual agent have and show the people that we're talking to or trying to prospect to or even sell in some cases. Knowledge, data, information. What I call it is, that big C word, credibility. If you don't have credibility, you're not going to get trust. So even if I'm talking to somebody I just bump into and I'm trying to find out if they have any real estate need or whatever, the more information and the more knowledge I have, I think the better I come across to that particular prospect or person.
Yeah.
And even if I'm talking to somebody I sold an apartment to 10 years ago, right? Knowledge evolves.
Yeah.
Things have changed. So the industry has changed. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. We got to take a quick break. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
I'm Brian Scott Cohen, one of the top loan originators in the country and the #1 mortgage originator at Guaranteed Rate Affinity. Guaranteed Rate Affinity arguably has the most advanced tech in the industry. Our completely digital loan process makes it easy and efficient for homeowners, from a 15-minute pre-approval to the digital application and through closing. My team and I would love to help you get into the home of your dreams.
From residential and commercial closings to litigation, Romer DeBoss is your full-service real estate law firm. We blend big firm knowledge with boutique-level attention, delivering outcomes that exceed every expectation. Contact us at romerdeboss.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So I want to talk a little bit about, when Molly had written this article that, really was kind of the driving force for this interview. And the idea of checking in isn't always about you being the agent. How does that shift the way agents should think about staying in touch with their people? Again, and I laugh because I see a lot of this, but, the self-centered agent out there, the person who only thinks about themselves, whatever. I call them banana heads. You've heard me talk about that before. But it really isn't always about us, okay? So how does that shift the way agents should think about staying in touch with people when my belief is we should be staying in touch with people and wanting to know what people want from us versus the other way around?
Yeah. I mean, when I sit down with agents and, they want to talk marketing strategy, right, which happens all the time.
Fine.
The first question I ask when we're talking is, what do you want people to get out of this? Or why does someone care? Or if someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to go and mail a building, like, what do you think? I'm like, well, why are they going to have a reason to care about reading about you? So let's start there. And truthfully, this has gotten a little bit easier, at least as a place to start your thinking from, and using AI, ChatGPT or the like, to be able to say, hey, these are my clients, they live here, they're this personality, like, help me design messaging that's going to appeal to them. And that's a great place to start from. You're not taking that, put it on the postcard and like done, but it's giving you a place to think from. And that to me is where it becomes very helpful. So if you start the conversation with not what do I want to get out of it, but what do my clients or what does the target audience want to hear, or what do they value, or what are they going to find interesting? If you start from there, you will naturally show up that much better, have that much more engagement and retention through that marketing effort.
Perfectly said, Jared. But again, just playing the other side of that. I almost said the words. Playing the other side of that. The sorry, inside joke. But that sense of urgency is still kind of like, So does that kind of cloud their thinking, or cloud, that it's about me. I got to get out there and I got to do this. How often are the agents listening?
This is again
when
fear.
I teach school, fear. But when I teach in school, I say the same thing. You have to listen. Stop talking.
Correct.
Listen.
And again, if you put yourself in a position of control, right? What does the position of control look like? It means that you're planning ahead. It means that you're approaching this with forethought, with diligence, and with the ability to say, okay, I am now planning out my next 12 to 18 months. It may change, but at least I'm starting to think about it. All too often, agents are like, well, so we're sitting here, it's the middle of March, right? And agents are like, hey, I want to get new business for the spring. I'm like, well, no. You need to start thinking now is the time to start building your listing business for the fall. Will you find a seller or two that are urgent and you may be able to list this spring? Maybe. But if your mindset is like, hey, it is officially the start of the spring market, right? Third week of March, that's my definition. We are now in the spring market in New York City. If you're thinking now it's time to build my listing business for the spring, you missed it, right? If anything, it's now how am I building my business for the fall? So that's where this is, that agents are not taking the proactivity. They're not having the forethought. They're not planning ahead. And when you constantly get in a reactive state, when it puts you on your back foot, that's when you start getting motivated by fear, by missing out, by stress, by angst, right? And that doesn't allow you to show up or perform your best.
Talk to me a little bit about reputation, okay? Because reputation, I think, is everything in our business. I got 2 new listings last week. One is signed, one is about to get signed. I personally believe it was about reputation, people knowing who I am, people hearing about, whatever I've done on the listing side, whatever. One in a building I always work in, one in a building I've never worked in. How important is reputation in our overall scope of understanding how we should approach this business? Should it be urgent? Should it be not so urgent? Should it be a balance between both? But I have to believe that reputation is everything. As our chairman says all the time, or as our CEO says all the time, your reputation arrives in the room before you do, right? And I firmly believe that.
Yeah.
So how does that affect us in this transactional business?
Yeah, and what Beth says is even more so true now in the day of AI and digital, right? If you reach out to a client, if you send a piece of mail or some solicitation, they're going to Google you, right? They're going to search you in AI. They're going to find all the information
100%.
about you. So what I like to talk about when it comes to reputation is that it is arguably one of the most valuable assets that anyone has. We're so focused when we look at a balance, sheet on what our assets are, cash, stocks, investments.
Yes.
Your reputation is the most valuable thing there.
100%.
Because if you have a good reputation, it will open up doors for you. People will want to be able to work with you. People will go out of their way to work with you, to follow up with you. To some extent, they would excuse you forgetting to reach out to them if you have a good reputation, right? On the other hand, if your reputation isn't great, it becomes an incredibly hard thing. It becomes a detriment for you to be able to overcome when you're trying to win business. And it forces you to be this transactional broker, not a relationship broker. So reputation is everything. And it takes a lifetime to build and a moment to ruin.
And it's so true, because when I worked in corporate America for 20 years before I became a real estate agent, I thought I was in the biggest people business in the world because I was a salesperson. But only until I came into real estate that I realized, oh, no, this is much more of a people business. And as you just pointed out, reputation, or my reputation, if I was going to succeed with people in this industry, had to be perfect, had to be stellar. Now, we're not perfect. I'm far from perfect, but you try and strive for that good every day. Learn, evolve, get better. See what doesn't work. See when you fall down and why you fall down and how you pick yourself up and why that was important, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, for newer agents, for example, okay, how do they build the habit of understanding the difference between business development before, as you said before, the pipeline gets quiet? If you're now starting to worry about prospecting for the spring, well, you missed it. You should have done that last fall. Now you got to talk about this coming fall. How do they understand that? How do they know that? What do you tell newer agents who look at you sometimes and say, well, Jared, I'm a little confused with what I should do, what I should be doing, where I should go, how I should prospect? Because the newer agents are what fuel this industry going forward. You know, these old hats here have been doing it for way too long, whatever. But the newer agents want to get better at what they do.
And truthfully, I think this is one of the hardest times for new agents to start in this business, especially if they don't have a network or the ability to draw some business from, right? So it really becomes, how do you get as much information on what's going on with the market? How do you build as deep of a pulse as quickly as possible? How do you learn technically how to do transactions? And then how do you learn the inventory and just being out there and preview and talking to people, right? Look at the areas where you like to recreate. Is there a way for you to build, genuine connections and have them understand that you're now in real estate? But it is a very difficult thing to be able to start in this business today if you don't have clients, because we've seen this flight to quality, because we've seen, the business that is there go to these larger teams or larger brokers. So as someone starting out, it's almost really important to be able to build the ability to get as much experience as you can, look to join a team, right? The catch-22, though, is a lot of these teams don't necessarily have the time or the bandwidth to train someone.
No.
So they want someone that's trained and experienced, but then how do you go and get that training and experience if you're just starting out? So this is where it becomes this sort of dynamic cycle in the business today.
And again, that's where people, even team members or team leaders, get caught up in the urgency of the day or what's happening in the day. The day that I had that closing last week, it overtook my entire day. And I think I know the difference between urgent and this. Took my whole day over, and I knew it was happening, and I was not happy about it, but it just is what it is. All right, we're going to come back after this break. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. What a day this is. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, I'm Dylan Pachulik, CEO of XL Real Property Management, New York's most trusted name in luxury property management since 2012. We specialize in managing individual apartments, townhouses, and rental buildings held by absentee owners. We maintain our properties with the highest standards of quality and service so that owners can choose a hassle-free approach to real estate investing. Rented or owner-occupied, we handle it all. For more information, contact us at xl-rpm.com.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay. All right, everybody. We are back, and Molly has joined us, so we're grateful for that. Molly, I want to ask you, welcome.
Thank you so much,
Nice to see you again, as usual. I want to ask you the same question I asked Jared a minute ago, because I think it's important. I mean, he gave me a great answer, but let's take it a little further. When we talk about the idea of checking in, not being about you, okay, and when I said at the beginning, you wrote an article on this, how does that shift the way agents should be thinking about staying in touch with people when it really isn't about you? And we all know, and I said to Jared before, agents, right, self-centered, me, it's all about me, but really it's not.
Yeah.
Right? Explain.
I have a mortgage banker who calls me repeatedly. I'm on his call list, even though I always say, his name is Joe. And I always say, hi, Joe. Just remember, I have not been a selling broker for many years. Like, you're not getting business from me, dude. So why am I on your call list? And I love his...
An actual call.
Yeah, an actual call.
Okay.
And he'll call me, and if I have a minute, I'll talk to him. right? I mean, here's the thing is that if you don't want to talk to someone, you just ignore the call.
Right.
We forget this, or agents forget this when they're in their heads and freaking out about rejection. So Joe calls me, and if I have a minute, I'll take his call. And he just says, "What's up?" Literally, like he has no talking script.
Lunch in a few minutes. So what's up?
And if I'm in the mood to chat, I'll chat. Like he's just asking questions about me, what's going on, and it's his thing. It works really well for him, and somehow the way he says it, I'll workshop something that's bothering me on the phone with Joe for 5 to 10 minutes. I don't do that with other people, but something about the lack of agenda and real sincerity in the question. Like, what's up, Molly? How are you doing? Like, well, let me tell you about my puppy that I just adopted in the winter, and there's 2.5 feet of snow on the ground.
That's near and dear to my heart. Puppies.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love that. But you mentioned rejection, okay?
Yes.
And I was going to ask Jared the same thing in a bit. Talk about rejection, because akin to show business, okay? You're out there, you're auditioning, you're doing a lot of things. We're auditioning every time we're in front of sellers, trying to get a deal, whatever. But rejection hurts. And rejection can be consistent in our business. And so when we talk about urgency, when we talk about calming down and prospecting, whatever, there's that element of rejection that happens in all of our worlds as real estate agents, in your guys, in management and consulting, whatever. How do we deal with that? Or how, in your opinion, are agents dealing with that, kind of putting it in perspective, if they can, and moving on?
I coach people in 2 ways. One is just to simply take a page from show business and build up some calluses.
We're all actors.
Right? It's part and parcel. The more you do it, the less scary it is. The more rejection you face if you are, in fact, auditioning all the time, the easier it gets. But then I also try a reframe, which is, what if it's not about you at all?
Interesting question.
Right? Because the core emotion in rejection is an assumption that you are the center of everything, right? That they are rejecting you, that it's personal.
Right.
When in fact, like 9 times out of 10, it's not. It has nothing to do. You learn that as I was an actress for many years. And you don't get the gig because, in my cases, I was always too tall. I was always too tall for the leading man, right? Or
shame on them.
Right?
Hello.
I'm like twice the size of Tom
in
Cruise, by the
for
way.
a little bit, but that Tom Cruise.
I
get it. Sorry, Tom.
But you never know why you're rejected when you don't get the gig. You don't get the feedback.
Of course not.
And the same thing is
it's
true.
It's always about next.
Yeah, the same thing is true when prospecting, making calls, even calling your sphere, right? So the people for whom you have influence over, they like you, they want you to succeed. Sometimes they just don't call you back.
Right. That's right.
Right?
But is that a negative?
No.
Because when you say sphere, right, we all have our own little orbit that we like to play to, to use a theatrical term, and to kind of nurture and build, as Jared was saying before. But sometimes they're not going to be so responsive. And I try to tell agents all the time, it's not because they don't like you or they don't want you. They don't have a need at the moment. As I said before the break, everyone is always so busy. Everyone's running around. But by the way, if you stay top of mind and you stay in front of them, when the need arises, and this happens to me all the time, and after 24 years in this industry, I'm like, wow, I can't believe he or she just called me. I did a deal with them 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? It's a wonderful thing. But it's because you stay there subtly, but when people get, again, when I was managing agents, the rejection was like, they're not calling me back. Oh my God, what do I do? And I can't get it, and I don't know. All right, just relax. Right. Because when there is a need, they will, right? How do we maintain our orbit in positive ways without making ourselves as agents really kind of cuckoo?
The
I
toughest.
mean, what do we think about, or should we be thinking about?
The toughest thing, and I'll use a specific example. I just started coaching an agent, and a lot of his sphere and his clientele are in the finance world. He is very hesitant to connect with them without having something really valuable to contribute. This is a big one, right? You hear all the time.
That's a lot of fear. He
I'm
mentioned fear before.
not the agent who's going to be just checking in. Like that's fluff. I'm not going to do that.
You're not Joe?
Hey,
That's a great story,
hey Molly,
by the way.
how are you? What's going on?
We love you, Joe.
So he psychs himself out of the conversations,
Yeah.
which is what's happening. And even people that he has a friendship and a personal relationship with, he's doing this as well. Like, they don't want to hear from me. There's no casual check-in as a salesperson. That's the baseline assumption. When, in fact, if you're really relationship building, then you have to check in randomly, because otherwise, if it's once a quarter, you contact them and you let them know how the market is, then that feels very formal and very agenda driven, right? It's like the friend who only calls you on your birthday, or the who messages you on Facebook, right?
By the way, Facebook stopped having the auto-populate happy birthday message because that used to be the lowest of the low effort.
But I miss that. I want to know when it's somebody's birthday.
Like, who is this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I went to elementary school with them. Yeah.
When you look at agents who have longevity in the business, both of you guys, what do you think they do differently when it comes to balancing that work, as Jared and I were talking about a minute ago, today, and for tomorrow? What are they doing differently? Okay, they're in the business a long time. Yes, and I said it before, I still get urgent and I still feel, crazy, whatever, but I think I've learned how to sort of balance that, right? Because I've been in the business long enough. So what do you think we go through to get to that point? Because a lot of agents ask me all the time, I know what you say, Vince, but I really wish I can calm down, but I really can't.
I've been thinking about this so much recently. And I have an idea to pitch to you guys. It's like a crazy concept. But I want to create a training facility like the tennis center in Florida, this kind of 5-star training facility that teaches agents dual agility. Okay, this is what you do, Vince. You probably have it naturally, but over the years, you've learned how to handle that dual agility, right? To put out a fire on an active transaction, pause, pivot, and then call someone, on your prospecting list.
It's learned.
It's learned.
Yeah.
It's learned. But what's, I think, really challenging now is we're in a market where every detail of a transaction has such high stakes that it's exhausting, right? You talk to any agent right now and they're just like, every deal is a slog, right? And that's really draining. That's draining emotionally. That's draining energetically. So you don't have the energy to do the input, right? To pivot and do the prospecting and do the business development.
Absolutely.
But if you already have that trained muscle, right? If you can play rhythm with your left hand and melody with your right hand, you just kind of go into autopilot. This is my new theory. So my training center, my 5-star training center,
I like the sound of that,
in Florida, will teach dual agility. We'll run drills every day. You'll have to hop on
Keep
a
it
call.
in New York and I'll come and work with you.
Okay, great. I was thinking,
I'm not going to
I
Florida.
was thinking, well, I don't really like Florida either, but the weather is nice.
So I think to practice this, all of the listeners, as long as you're not driving, should try to rub your belly and pat your head.
Yes.
And let's see.
Yes.
That's a good way to
If
start
that
there.
works, that worked.
That context shifting is so important.
Yeah.
I do want to hark back to the rejection piece for 1 second. So I think the mindset that an agent needs to have, and I love the way that Molly's reframing it, but quite frankly, rejection is the norm in this business. Unless you are
Big time.
privileged to be able to work entirely off of a close net of referrals where you have an exceptionally high closing rate, you need to understand that the norm is to be rejected. It would actually be abnormal to not be rejected. And again, it's not personal. It just means that it wasn't the right time.
Absolutely.
But you have to approach it from that way. And if you can't, then you got to go find a different industry or a different job. But if you reframe it that way, then it becomes the hunt to say, oh, I'm going to get rejected again. No, it becomes a hunt to be able to say, okay, like, how do I go and get that win? How do I get it? And that, the people that love cold calling understand that. They have that mentality. It becomes a sport to them to be able to go and say, okay, how do I get through? How do I break through? And then how do I continually adapt my approach so that it works? Because the approach is not static.
One of the things I wanted to point out too is, and Jared and I have talked about this on several shows lately. You know, the inventory issue today, okay, is our biggest problem going forward, I believe, in 2026. You know, for the last 2 years, it was interest rate and all the drama with interest rate. And there's a little bit of that, but they've come down to a point now where I think buyers out there are comfortable. But the inventory, and if you want to talk about, you know, I feel like I'm rejected personally by the inventory. Because I have been in this business for a long time. And I remember the days where I could show 14 apartments in one day with a car service, be exhausted at the end of the day, whatever. And I have a new buyer coming up, and I'm stressing because I can't come up with enough to show this person. And I'm like, okay, so inventory, get better. So when you want to talk about, you know, people getting rejected or feeling rejected or not feeling really good about themselves, how do we overcome that? You know, I'm asking you as a coach, for me, how do I deal with the fact that inventory is what it is today? It will get better, but when? And in the meantime, what do I do about it? You know?
It sounds to me like you're caught a little bit in a comparison trap because it's all relative, right? And you're comparing inventory to a more abundant market from the past.
Yep, exactly.
Right?
100%.
Your car service, knocking out 14 appointments a day.
Good old days.
Oh, the glory days.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is
Reality.
the market. This is the market that we're in, right? And I think the greatest service you can provide is helping to level set your buyer's expectations. Because I think not enough of that work is done up front.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
You know, buyers are dreamy, unrealistic, fickle, moody, all of the things, right? That doesn't change, inventory or not, but really like setting that expectation, this is what there is.
100%.
I'm going to answer two ways. So I think first, and Molly's touched on this, understand that in any market, there's winners and losers. There's incredible agents, there's top producers, and there's not. So people succeed in any market. Adaptation is the key. Number two, so I wrote my my winter in review. I just published it this morning on my LinkedIn. And inventory is the key thing, right? We had a horrible winter in terms of being frigid and a lot of snow. And it definitely held sellers back more than buyers. So the market felt more competitive than people would have expected because there was 2% fewer contracts signed, but 14% less new inventory than last year. So that is a disparity between demand and supply. So how competitive the market is this spring, which is our busiest time, is going to depend on how much new inventory meets the expected increase in buyer demand. Now, the other piece, back to Molly's point, the reason why the market feels really hard now is because the market is not inherently favoring a buyer or a seller. We are in a good old-fashioned broker's market. And it has been since 2010 and early 2011 that we have been in a market that feels like this. So we are going back quite some time, 16, 17 years, and there's not a lot of brokers in this market that remember that or and they were ones that were active, but remembering it is a different thing.
That's 100% correct.
So because we're in this broker's market, you have all the characteristics that Molly just described. You don't have this extrinsic motivation driving either sellers or buyers, right? You don't have sellers that are fearful that prices are going to fall. You don't have sellers, acting because prices are rising and things are flying off the shelves. On the same side, you don't have buyers that are fearful that prices are rising like we had in the glory days of 13 to 15. Buyers were self-motivating themselves just out of fear of missing out or prices rising, right? At the same time, there's not this sense that prices are falling. We're not really waiting for interest rates anymore. So at the end of the day, buyers are going to transact based upon their life needs. So because everything is now intrinsically motivated, whether you're on a seller or a buyer, the only thing that we can do as real estate professionals is know the right people, stay in touch, be able to have conversations like Joe to say, hey, what's up? And try to be able to pull out what is going on intrinsically and internally, understand what may have changed between our check-ins, and be there when they are ready. We will not force, convince, or make a buyer or seller transact. But we can be there to be that voice of reason, that advisor, and that support, be the smartest, most knowledgeable, know the inventory when they're ready. And that's why showing up, why being in the room and being in front of people is the most important thing today. The rest will fall into place.
Amen, Jared.
Unbelievable. Very well said. But
can I add something, Vince?
of course you can.
I always want to zoom out, right? And look at, I love that you mentioned, Jared, well, most people don't remember what it was like 16, 17 years ago.
They don't.
What I think we don't talk about enough is the emotional, the anxiety that we have culturally post-pandemic, right? So there's a heaviness to the world right now that, sure, I mean, wars have always been occurring. The stock market falls, rises. There are catastrophes all the time, right? That doesn't change. That is the way of the world. But what has changed is this feeling that everything can just be taken away in an instant, right? Like the rug can be pulled out from under us.
So true.
And that's the difference pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic. We've experienced that. We have experienced the world stopping. And
Like it's never done before.
like it's never done before. So all of those conditions are the same except for that. And I think when we talk about why it's not about us, why it's our service to connect with other human beings and listen, it's because there aren't enough people doing that, right? Just like Joe, I mean, laugh all you want at Joe and his technique. Like, he's genuinely interested in what's going on in my life.
And he's memorable.
And he's memorable.
My favorite word. But no, that's very true. And, the topic today is why is this business so hard or whatever we officially named it. And it's for all of the reasons that both of you spoke about. But we can control that, I believe, and we can work it. You used to still say, level up, bring it up to the next level. Because, look, as old as I am in this business, I start every year thinking, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? But I tell myself all the time, I got to bring it up to the next level. I don't always know what that level is, but I know I got to do something, right? And then when I feel like I have achieved that next level, I'm like, all right, good. Keep going, okay? And keep going. We are out of time. I am so sorry. That is our show for today. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. To Jared and to Molly, my God, they'll come back again soon. We'll be right back with my final thoughts.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
All right, everybody, we are back with my final thoughts. Great show. If there's a takeaway from this conversation, it's that longevity in real estate really comes from doing one thing well. It comes from learning how to hold two responsibilities at the same time, managing the deals in front of you while continuing to build the relationships that will create the next ones. The urgent will always demand your attention. That's the nature of this business. But the agents must learn not to let urgency consume all of their focus. And maybe the shift is simply what we think. Staying connected doesn't always have to be strategic or perfectly timed. Sometimes it's just about reaching out, checking in, and remembering that the relationship itself is the business. Because what feels like a small amount of connection today often becomes the opportunity of a lifetime tomorrow. And that's it for this episode of Talking New York Real Estate. We should always remember, it's not about grand promises or overnight changes. It's about intention, choosing clarity over noise, growth over comfort, and being deliberate with how we show up every day. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching and for being a part of the conversation. If you think this episode brought value, share it, subscribe, and keep asking the questions that matter. Until next time, stay informed, stay intentional, and keep finding your space. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Substack, or TikTok at Vince Rocco. And John Wooden said, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I am very grateful. Keep thinking the good thoughts, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
Okay, everybody, we are back with Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage, which is our sponsor here, and we're very grateful to Stephen and his firm for sponsoring this show. We've been running 12 years, as everybody knows. We're going to celebrate that in a couple of weeks, and thankfully, we get to continue based on some great sponsorship. Stephen, we're going to talk about neighborhoods today and how they're changing, how they're growing, how some of them are, staying, where they were last time we had a conversation, meaning movement-wise. But I'm still reading, though, Stephen, that the Upper East Side is still kind of going crazy, and people are still moving in and out. One of the things I also wanted to ask you too is, what I'm seeing is, and I read an article recently, is that there's a lot of movement within neighborhoods, but people aren't leaving the neighborhoods. They're kind of staying in the neighborhood and just moving around, selling an apartment, buying another one because they like it, because the schools are there. So what are you guys seeing from a moving perspective, Upper East Side?
Well, there are a number of things that the data is showing us, Vince. For one, the Upper East Side, from the last time we spoke, is pretty much remained the same. People are either moving internally within their buildings, they're either upgrading, moving to larger apartments because they're expanding or growing their families, but they're also becoming empty nesters. So they're downsizing, moving to smaller apartments, but again, staying in the same neighborhoods where they're familiar. And yes.
Why do you think that is, though? I mean, I agree with you 100% because that's what the data is showing us. But why are people, unlike what used to go on in the past, they're staying in their same neighborhood? In this particular case, the Upper East. Why?
I think it's because of familiarity. They are comfortable knowing with the relationships that they've established with their doormen, the vendors. They patronize the same supermarkets, the synagogues, the schools, the parks. Those are all, areas that they're familiar with.
Sure.
And so why not stay? Why not?
I mean, I'm one to talk. I'm living in my apartment on the Upper West Side for 22 years, right? Same apartment. I haven't, whatever. I've done all that in the past, but moving and changing, whatever. But I get it because I like my neighborhood. It works for me. It's convenient to and from work, whatever. So I get that. What after the Upper East Side, though, where is the next neighborhood that's really kind of, making headlines?
Well, you mentioned that you live on the Upper West Side.
Upper West.
And the data is consistent with what we spoke about a month ago.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the Upper East Side. People are familiar with the neighborhoods. They're familiar with the parks. They're also moving within their buildings. There are internal moves. They're upsizing due to expanding families.
Very true.
And also becoming empty nesters. But so it really comes down to familiarity.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the both what I call both sides of the park. Upper East, Upper West, they're neighborhoods, and this is where people feel comfortable, especially when they're raising children. In this town, it's all about schools. We're not in the suburbs where you have a whole different set of schools. We have schools here in New York, public school system, private school system, that people want to be within walking distance or driving distance to take their kids to school, and kids are in school for 12 years. So it's a long time. So I agree with what you say when they're downsizing, empty nesters, kids go off to college, maybe they want a smaller place, but they're staying within the same boundaries of those uptown neighborhoods. Where else?
Murray Hill, for an example.
My first apartment was in Murray Hill when I first came to live in the city.
Yeah. So our data is showing that Murray Hill remains consistent.
Yeah.
An area where young professionals are moving. There are lots of rentals, both short-term and long-term. Lots of offices that are close proximity to where they live.
Sure, absolutely. Great trains.
Lots of bars.
Lots of bars.
And restaurants where people tend to meet up.
Some of my favorite things in that neighborhood when I first moved here was the bars, was the restaurants, and of course the trains. I mean, very close walking distance to the 456. It was wonderful. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting how that neighborhood has kind of come and gone. It never really left in popularity, but it was very popular when I first moved there 30 years ago. Sorry. And it's kind of come back again for all the reasons you just said, because people find the convenience, the familiarity, walk to work. I used to walk to work. I mean, it was a wonderful thing. What's after that?
Thanks for asking, Vince. For the similar reasons, Midtown West. As you and I know, Midtown West, there's lots of office corporations, lots of rentals, lots of short-term rentals. People are coming in town on short-term assignments. And so what we're seeing there is that people are attracted to these areas because of its proximity to their offices, restaurants, proximity to train stations, and of course, the highways.
Very true. From my perspective, I happen to be a Midtown West specialist. I mean, I've been selling apartments in Midtown West for, 20 years. And for all the reasons you just said, it's very attractive to people because a lot of people like to walk to work when they live in Manhattan. There are, as you indicated, all kinds of businesses, all kinds of places of employment. The food and the bar scene and the restaurant scene in Midtown West, in my opinion, bar none. Obviously, you have the theater district, so you're catering to a much better quality food and restaurant for the theater district. But I absolutely agree with that. Midtown West, and again, pre-COVID, post-COVID, whatever, neighborhoods changed a little bit. But I am, and I'm there in Midtown West all the time. I'm heading there after the show, as a matter of fact. It's booming again. And I don't want to say zooming, but it's getting to the point where it's booming and zooming, and people are, if they haven't already discovered it, are really kind of finding out what the real attributes of that neighborhood are. I think it's an incredible neighborhood. What about other areas?
Brooklyn. We spoke about this almost 30 days ago. We see the similar trends in Brooklyn. Families continue to migrate to Brooklyn because it's a family area, large parks, great schools, synagogues. People are upsizing into family homes, downsizing as well, and its proximity to views in the subways and easy access to New York City make it attractive.
I've talked for years about Brooklyn, and I always say if I were younger and starting out again, I would go immediately probably to Brooklyn for all the reasons you just brought up. Its proximity to Manhattan is a train stop away, for example, Brooklyn Heights. I mean, and all the new development that's happened out there, bringing families. And I will say it's not the most cheap place to live. I mean, it got very expensive through the years because of the popularity of everybody wanting to be there. And again, I'm old enough to remember when people started in Brooklyn, friends of mine and ran from Brooklyn and ran into Manhattan because it was a thing to do. Who wanted to stay in Brooklyn, right? You wanted to come to Manhattan, the city. It's not. It's completely reversed, and it's way back to Brooklyn. I'm a big fan, and I think Brooklyn is hot. What do we have left?
Well, just to summarize, the Manhattan market is still booming. People are still moving within their selective neighborhoods for their personal reasons, whether it be because they're either upgrading, expanding their families, or becoming empty nesters. They
So much
love
of that.
They love the familiarity of living in neighborhoods where they feel extremely safe, where they have beautiful restaurants and stores and easy access and great schools.
Manhattan's, again, like I said, pre-COVID, post-COVID, whatever, Manhattan has come and gone. Pricing got a little out of control in Manhattan. But you're 100% right on the money there. Manhattan, I believe, and for no other reason than it's Manhattan, will remain or has remained the number one place that everybody from wherever wants to come to New York, come to Manhattan. It is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
Good to see you as always.
Likewise. Likewise.